In the run-up to last week's passage of the continuing resolution to fund the federal government, President-elect Trump took to his social media platform to blast Texas Republican Congressman Chip Roy. Trump had wanted the debt ceiling to be raised as part of a funding package, but Roy wanted companion spending cuts online. The president-elect called Roy a, quote, Republican obstructionist. And this morning we have Congressman Roy with us. He, of course, is the Freedom Caucus policy chair, and we welcome him to the broadcast. Thanks for coming on. Well, let's start with this. What did you think when you first read President-elect Trump's comments about you?
Well, Merry Christmas. Great to be on the show. I mean, look, this politics is rough and tumble business. President Trump knows exactly what he wants. He wants the debt ceiling pushed aside so that Chuck Schumer can't use it as leverage against him and against Republicans. And we know Chuck Schumer's been going around the Senate saying he wants to use it to try to constrain President Trump's agenda. So President Trump wanted it gone. Now, here's the problem. We didn't get that tweet till Wednesday night at like 6 o'clock. The president had never told us, hey, I need the debt ceiling or no CR before Christmas. Well, the bill had been built up like a normal Christmas tree bill. With all due respect to Republican leadership, it was a bad bill. It blew up Wednesday afternoon. Those of us who are pretty known and pretty consistent in our track record that we don't agree to borrow more money without forcing some discussion about spending cuts, we said no. And it wasn't just Freedom Caucus. It wasn't just Chip Roy. There were 38 Republicans who stood up and said, wait a minute, we can't do this. And you know what? Since I've been home in Texas, everybody I've seen, everybody I've talked to have said thank you because they're tired of it. President Trump didn't run on racking up more debt. He ran on controlling inflation, driving down spending, securing the border. So I stand firmly behind it, and I'm not going to blink. I'm not going to vote for a debt ceiling increase unless we have significant spending cuts.
Congressman, have you spoken to President-elect Trump since he made those comments?
Well, I don't talk about private conversations. It's the general rule I have, but I've certainly been in contact with Mar-a-Lago broadly and with Republican leadership. They know where I stand. I think everybody understands, tweets and trying to, pressure that way. That's not going to change why I got elected. I got elected to reduce spending, drive down inflation, shrink government. I'm not going to shy away from that fight. I'm not going to blink.
So let's talk about that, because there's a question mark about what we just saw in the last week and a half and what that portends for 2025 as it relates to the budget, as it relates to potentially taxes, tax cuts, or maintaining the current tax policy in this country, and whether we can balance a budget doing any of these things. How does that lay out for you, if you will?
Well, we've got a plan that we've put together as conservatives and fiscal hawks. We're working with the speaker on that. We're going to work with the president on that. We're working with some of his incoming folks in the administration, from J.D. Vance to Russ Vought, the Treasury Secretary incoming. Look, everybody gets the joke. We're $36 trillion in debt. We're going to run a deficit of $2 trillion this year, $1 trillion in interest, which is more than national defense. So we've got to use the reconciliation process, which only requires Republican votes, to unite around spending restraint, coupled with whatever we need to do on the debt ceiling and whatever tax policy we believe is important for economic growth. But to be very clear, and then look, this is CNBC, a Squawk Box. I've been watching this show for years. Wall Street Journal friends. Look, we believe in tax restraint, but we also need spending restraint. We're going to have to work together to do what's necessary. The Wall Street Journal had an editorial yesterday where they talked about how the reason that we don't cut spending is because a lot of these programs are popular. A lot of people like all of these different programs. They're exactly right. That's why when the DOGE guys came in, Elon and Vivek, I pointed to my Republican colleagues and I said, the problem is right here in this room. Because we have Republicans and Democrats who never met a program they didn't want to promote for some sort of political gain. And what I'm saying is we got to pay the piper. The piper's here. We got to do our job. We got to, really stand up and do what we've always said we're going to do, which is engage in fiscal discipline.
How influential do you think that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will ultimately be? Clearly, they ultimately helped kill the original bill, that's for sure. I'm not sure they were thrilled about the final bill that went in, because clearly Trump wasn't there either.
Well, I think they're going to have significant influence in terms of what they're doing. They're identifying a lot of spending waste. I think they can use their pulpit. I think that they can broadcast that, shine the light on it. Transparency is great.
How big a cut do you think? I mean, what do you think they're really going to be able to go after? Do you think they're going to touch healthcare? Do you think they're going to touch the Department of Defense? Are we talking about just discretionary stuff? And if that's the case, is it just on the margins?
All right, well, let's just take a couple of examples. If we return non-defense spending to pre-COVID era explosion in spending, we could save something like $200 and something billion a year, which scores as $2 trillion over 10. If we were to go through and just put in restraint on the use of food stamps to feed our people sugar, for example, always tied to the Farm Bill, we can save hundreds of billions of dollars. If we repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, which is crippling our economy, undermining oil and gas, and empowering China, we could save $750 billion. We can do a lot of savings right out of the gate to reverse the Biden damage, get the economy going, reduce regulations, but not touch benefits that our seniors rely on. Yes, we need to address Medicare and Social Security in the long haul, no question. But right now, we should reverse Biden damage, get spending restraint on Medicaid, reforms that need to be put in place, tax policy that matches all of that, and we need to do our job to constrain the bureaucracy, cutting non-defense discretionary. That would only be a 13% cut. You and I could go find 13% of waste, and I think the DOGE guys can too, and that would be fiscally responsible, and the American people would cheer President Trump and Republicans if we do that.
They can find all sorts of cost savings, Congressman, but how does it play out in terms of the process? I mean, once I identify these potential cuts, you guys get into the fray, and then you have the same arguments. How does this actually work?
Well, we've got reconciliation. We've got a couple of bites at the apple. We need to get our plans going right away in January, and we've already been laying those out. We've got to work with the incoming administration to use reconciliation. And for the people out there who don't understand, reconciliation is the process under the Budget Act that allows us to make sure that we're striving for deficit reduction by balancing out the accounts between taxes and spending. So that's our job. We should do that. By the way, the Democrats used reconciliation to jam Obamacare through. So we have an obligation to reverse the damage of these radical progressive Democrats under the Inflation Reduction Act. And the process is we come together, put together, I think, a step one reconciliation package to give the president tools he needs to secure the border, make sure that defense is in the right place, and make sure everything's paid for, reverse a lot of the Biden damage, and do that in step one with a debt ceiling increase the president wants so Chuck Schumer can't roil the bond markets. Then you come in a second package, deal with the tax policy, and deal with the significant mandatory spending reforms already alluded to, whether it's food stamps, whether it's some of the stuff that's been jammed in there with Medicaid, and a lot of things that we can do to reduce spending. And now we're cooking with peanut oil. Now we can actually do our job.